they were just fighting over it the other day, and it was causing problems. And I told them, I said, guys, your relationship is far more important to me than a video game system.
But more importantly, we need to be there mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with our kids, whatever time we have with them.
But you're literally running your family, running your fatherhood like a business.
I recognized that it wasn't about me being the hero to my family. And that's going to be counterintuitive to what most of the world says about dad, right? It's dad's the hero. Dad wears the cape. Dad's Superman. I actually think it's the opposite.
Welcome to the Coaches Council podcast with Justin and Pradeep, where the art and science of athletics and business come together to create real life quality application that creates life-changing results through actionable takeaways. As we always say, nothing changes if nothing changes, so let's get started. Welcome back to another week of the Coaches Council. We are all rocking our blue blockers here if you're not taking a look on YouTube. Our guest today, Justin Batt, pulling them out. He now looks just like us. And too bad there's not a way to block out the cold. Well, I guess that's called a jacket. But here in Buffalo, we've got a little bit of cold weather. I'm sure Pradeep up in Toronto, you've got that going on as well.
Yeah, not as bad as you, though. I think Buffalo gets hit a little bit harder than we do.
Yeah, we got that nice lake effect. But today it's going to be hot in here because we've got Justin, and Pradeep today. And I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Justin Batt, who is the CEO and founder of Daddy Saturday, and really focusing on the enhancement of fathers everywhere and how they show up, and really hoping to solve the fatherless epidemic by helping fathers overcome obstacles to engaging with their kids. And it's such a noble cause, and it's such an undertaking that so many people are facing nowadays. And I don't care whether you're in US, Canada, Europe, Asia, it's something that is prevalent everywhere, and it's something and a conversation that needs to be had. So Justin, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, man, I'm excited to be on with you guys tonight, and it's an honor to be here. So let's do it.
Rock and roll. So Justin, tell us a little bit about your experience in this space. What prompted you to get into this space, and what really drove your passion to build an entire business around this model?
Well, I was a young dad, and my wife had left teaching and started her own business and was working in retail. So she's wearing all the hats, being the entrepreneur of the family, and I was in corporate America. And when she started the business, we had our first child at the same time. And so I found myself at home alone with our first child every day on Saturdays. And then fast forward, we added 3 more kids to the mix, all boys. So a girl and 3 boys at that point, 4 kids. And she was working Saturdays, and I was that dad coming home stressed out, tired, overwhelmed, feeling inadequate, just wanting to take a break and do what I wanted to do on those Saturdays, but recognizing I wanted to support my wife and also be there for my kids. And we just weren't having the best days. I had what I called a dad hangover most of those Saturdays. It was kind of loafing my way into the day. And I just felt called and compelled to have a wake-up call and engage my kids and interact with them in a way that would make lasting memories, enhance our relationship, and create these epic experiences. So that's what we did. Created a game plan for our time together. I do a little bit of research during the week and plan out our day, and we'd go after it. And I just saw this immense change in the trajectory of my relationship with my kids, our communication, our relationship with my wife, and my kids affectionately named it Daddy Saturday. So that's what it became, and it's what we did almost every Saturday. Well, fast forward, I was asked to give a TEDx a couple years later on the topic of fatherlessness. And it really struck a chord in my heart, and just felt called to come out there and help. It was my calling, and not only recognize that there's 25 million kids in America that don't have a father figure in their home today, a biological father, but there's also a lot of dads that are out there, millions more, that are in the home physically present, but they're emotionally absent. And I have a solution for that. It's called Daddy Saturday. It's called intentional parenting, right? And so I felt called and led to go and pursue that side of that fatherlessness coin and help those dads who are in the home be intentional, be engaged, and change their legacy. So we wrote the book, Daddy Saturday. We launched the platform, used technology, and created communities to help dads engage their kids with intentionality. And we've done that for the past 2 years. And now we've also launched a 501c3 and international ministry. We've got Daddy Saturday Kenya established, which is just incredible what they're doing over there in Kenya. And we're also launching this year what we call Kid Boss, which is our way to address the fatherless child. And by helping those kids that have an absentee father in the home, by creating a virtual mentorship, a coaching platform, like the great work that you and Pradeep do, being a male figure in their life to serve as a coach, a mentor, as a guide, virtually at first. And we're also launching intensives at our farm outside of Nashville to help those kids come in, have that experience, and then have an accountability mentor when they leave in a virtual capacity. So that's what we do. That's the journey to where we are today. And it's been a fun campaign of trying to end fatherlessness around the world, and we're just getting started.
Well, that's super powerful there. Excuse me, Justin. You know, some of our listeners might not know the impact of, you know, we talk about this stat that we talk about, divorce stats or fatherless stats. But from your experience, what's the overall impact this is having on kids, family units, communities, the society, the country as a whole, when you see kids growing up without fathers?
Well, look, it's the number one societal ill that we face today, and it's the biggest epidemic, rather, that we face today, and all the societal ills that come from that, no one's talking about it. And yet, if you look at teenage pregnancy, if you look at divorce, you look at substance abuse, suicides, depression, anxiety, technology addiction, even school shootings, they're all tied to fatherlessness. Human trafficking, right? Another really big topic right now. 90% of kids that are homeless or runaways are from a fatherless background. So if you just look at any societal problem we have today, it stems back to the role of a father in the family. So the breakdown of the family, in my opinion, is the biggest issue that we have today. And so, you know, our campaign is to help fathers, one, if they're in a marriage and in the family, is to re-engage in their marriage, focus on that first, but then also work on being intentional in creating that legacy with their kids. So raising good kids that become great adults. But if they're a kid who doesn't have that father figure in their life, then the way you blunt those statistics is by inserting a father figure. So at least they have a positive example, a positive role model, something to look up to, so they don't become another one of those statistics. And when they become a father one day, right, we break that cycle, we break that chain.
Yeah, I think what you just said there is important because it becomes a cycle. It's tough to know how to father if you weren't fathered yourself, or you weren't, you didn't have a father in your life, and from some perspective. And that's tough because as people, that's how we learn. We learn from our parents. And if our parents' relationship sucks, then we're going to learn the same for our relationship. So that I commend you for the work that we do, because I see it on the other side here. I live in Canada, and it's not as bad there or here in terms of the statistics, but it's climbing and it's slowly getting up there. One of the things that I see is fathers that are there, and you mentioned a really good point, not being present. I think that is even more important, because I think sometimes as fathers, we think we have to spend a certain amount of hours with our kids, or be there at specific times during the day. But more importantly, we need to be there mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with our kids, whatever time we have with them. And I don't see that. One of the biggest things, and I love technology, but the smartphone, for me, I see a lot of people getting caught in that, fathers and you can say mothers. What do you see there from that standpoint when it comes to technology? I'm interested to know how you feel about technology and fatherhood.
Well, technology to me is neither good nor bad, right? It's how you use the technology. And so I saw that technology was being used in a lot of wrong ways. And if you look at the statistics today, again, New York Times published a piece about a year ago, and it looked at kids that were in affluent communities versus those that were in lower income communities. And what they found was that the average kid in a low income community is spending 8+ hours a day on a screen. The kid that was in an affluent community was 5 hours or less. And they saw this huge divide starting to happen. The reason why is because they started to pull technology out of the school and the affluent communities, because they recognized that these kids were on screens all day long. In the lower income communities, they're one-to-one iPad, one-to-one technology, because we got to catch our kids up. We can't let them get behind in technology. What they're doing is putting in front of a screen all day during school. Then they go home, and the screen oftentimes is their babysitter or their parent, and they're on that screen as well when they're home. So 8+ hours a day, that's insane, right? This is the amount of time that these kids are spending on technology. But it all stems from what you said, Pradeep, and that is, it's far more is caught than taught. That's what we say in Daddy Saturday. And so the kids are learning this from somewhere, right? Or it's being allowed from somewhere. If the parents are on their phones, if the parents are using technology when they're sitting at the dinner table, when they're at the ball game, when they're driving in the car, when they're every waking moment of the day, if they have them in the bedroom with them, they're setting an example for the kids to say that technology is okay. Or if they're saying you can't do that to their kid, but then they're doing it themselves, again, they're setting an improper example. So I think with technology, it comes back to setting boundaries. And I finally relented, and I bought my kids for Christmas a Nintendo Switch. And we've got 4 kids, so I bought the Switch because all 4 of them can play at one time. We bought multiplayer games. We bought games that aren't like the never-ending games. They just go on and on and on, right? It's like racing or sports or things of that nature where there's an end to it. And we set time limits, and our kids get to play. It's earned, not given in our home. And so for them to be able to go and engage with technology, they have to earn it, meaning they have to read a book or make sure their homework's finished or go outside and engage in physical activity first. And if they do those things and they say, hey, Dad, we were out playing for an hour and a half, we did this or that, can we go play the Switch for 30 minutes? Or can we go play a game? Sure, go for it, right? But if they constantly ask for it and they haven't done what they need to do first in order to gain that, then it doesn't happen. They were just fighting over it the other day, and it was causing problems. And I told them, I said, guys, your relationship is far more important to me than a video game system. I will take the thing back. I will give it away in 2 seconds because your relationship with each other is far more important to me than the video game system. So if you can't handle it, you can't play well together, then goes away. And their behavior changed pretty quickly.
That just reminds me of what happened in our house today because my mom's here visiting for a few weeks, and she had bought my son a PS4 a couple of years ago, and he was saying some inappropriate things. He's 7, so he likes just things like poop and stuff like that, like all the time. My mom's just like, just stop. Like, that's just enough.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't stop. She's like, that's it. I'm taking the PS4 back. You're done. You should have just seen the look on his face. But I think that's important because especially now I'm seeing a lot of dads not be as firm as they should be, and dad's not being as firm as like my dad when he wouldn't even have to say anything, just that look, and it'd be like, that's okay, I'm done, whatever you want me to do, I'm gonna do. But it doesn't seem like that we don't have that same effect. Like my son just talks back all the time, and I have to be more diplomatic, I have to try to explain things, but then it comes a point in time where it's just like, that's it, kid, just do it.
Yeah. It's a challenge I think all of us face as parents. And look, the demands on parents today and on fathers today are greater than they've ever been before. And so, we've got this technology being one of those demands and one of those distractions. And it's no different for our kids. I think that there's a lot more placed on our kids today as well. And it creates that kind of tension in the home at times. And one of the things that's helped us the most is I've taken a long tail view on my role as a parent. And so instead of looking at it in the micro moment that you're in today, it's looking at it in that long tail and saying, okay, where do I want my kids to be 20, 30 years from now? Not where do I want them to be, who do I want them to be, right? And so that micro moment today is impacting who they're going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I also want to look at my behavior today, knowing that's going to impact my relationship with my kids down the road, because I want them to come and hang out with me when they have the option to hang out with me, right? I want them to be around when they have the option to be around. And the way that I handle myself today in front of them, even though they're young, is going to impact that way down the road. And so it comes back to us in our house, and we focus a lot on obedience being the bare minimum. Like, that's the standard. If you're just not being obedient, and I'm not talking about the authoritative, like, just do this because I said you got to do it, right? Like, a lot of our dads were that way, and their dads were that way, clearly, in the way that that's progressed. I think fatherhood has changed in that capacity. So we've shifted that focus to say, look, obedience is kind of the expectation. So we just kind of play it off like, if you're not being obedient, then like you're below average for our family. Honor is what we're focused on. How do we get you to a place of honor? How are you honoring your mother, right? If she makes dinner and you just go sit down and plow into your food and you don't wait until she's seated, like, that's not honoring your mom and the fact that she just made dinner for you. Going and sitting down and just abusing technology and then getting in a fight and doing all that, that's not honoring the fact that we purchased that game system. We spent our money on that system for you guys, and now you're not honoring us as your parent as a part of that. And it's been game changing, because when you talk about honor, like, it's a whole other level, and our kids actually understand that. Respect is the word that we use a lot because we had to get to what honor means. But once we got there, it's not perfect. I mean, we still have plenty of parenting conversations and plenty of moments where I get like you just described, where it's like, just do it. But obedience and honor and that mechanism has helped us a lot.
I find that really interesting, Justin, because you said a word that really kind of hit home, and I think with a lot of the listeners really made you kind of perk up, and that was emotionally absent, where you're present, but there's no intentionality behind anything that's
Yeah,
going on.
that's right.
And not only do we notice that in parenting, but we notice that in our businesses, we notice that in our health, we notice that in our wellness, we notice that in the way that we show up for ourselves. And when you talked about what you did for your kids, where for your Daddy Saturday, when it originated, which was really just very simple in nature. You took time, you planned, you structured, you organized, you executed. It created this plan of no different than it does to lose weight, than it does to have a night routine, than it does to build a business. You literally took the same plan and moved it over to what you do with your kids. And this cycle that you've ended up creating with that is a cycle that pushes honor, respect, and the cycle of tradition of the way that we typically have done things is now creating a different conversation at home, and ultimately in the family construct, that creates more engaged, more confident, more self-aware, and more intentional kids as well. And so kudos to you for that, because it's so empowering and so unique and different, and it's a different conversation than a lot of people are having. Now, my question here is for you, the impact on you, the father, the dad, being more intentional with your kids. What has the impact been for you in the other aspects of your life?
Well, it's caused me to be intentional in all aspects of my life. I think that that word is so powerful. And, as I looked at the way that I wanted to show up in front of my kids, I had to go back and take a personal inventory of myself and say, where am I falling short and not allowing myself to show up at 100% in front of my kids? And so I looked at my week and I'm like, gosh, I'm burning the candle at both ends, right? I'm getting up early, doing a devotional, working out, getting it in. Then I'm traveling a lot. What am I eating? Am I sleeping well? I had to look at all areas of my life, my marriage, right? All those things. What was I doing at the time? I've been sober for 3 years. I quit drinking. I was a social drinker, didn't have a drinking problem. But I looked at my life and I said, you know what? Is alcohol helping me or is it hindering me? I'm having a couple of cocktails on Friday night to calm down after a long week, not feeling my best on Saturday morning when I wake up, not full of energy, not ready to engage my kids. So I said, what's more important to me, having a couple of drinks or being there for my kids? So I cut it out of my life. That was a personal decision. Not saying everybody has to stop drinking, but that's the decision that I made as part of that personal inventory as I went back, right? It was impacting my sleep. It was impacting my health. And so I went through my life and made that inventory, laid out my ideal week. And one of the biggest things I did was I blended my personal calendar with my professional calendar. Sounds so simple, but man, is the moment I started putting those moments on my calendar where I had a ball game at 4:30, so I had to shut down work at 3:30 in order to get there on time. And that means I need to wrap my day up early, so I wasn't trying to do emails while I was sitting at the ballpark and not being engaged. That's what being present and engaged means. You're there in the moment, fully engaged in what's happening. I would get my workouts in the morning. I would do what I needed to do for me first thing before my kids were awake, so that I didn't have to worry about it the rest of the day. I was feeling great all day long because, man, I got my devotional in. I read God's word. I worked out. I did all the things I needed to do before my kids even woke up, spent some time with my wife first thing in the morning. And therefore, when it got to the end of the day, I was there fully present, fully engaged. I wasn't thinking about all the things I had to do for me. I could focus on what I needed to do for them.
What has it done from your stance or your perception of yourself as a man? Pradeep, if you go back to probably 20 episodes ago, we did modern day masculinity. We did a three-part series on modern day masculinity with John Romanello, and really started to learn about the male female energies, the way in which they collaborate together, the confidence at which males can or cannot exude on a day-to-day basis in today's society. But what did structuring your day, organizing your day, pairing this together, being more intentional, showing up and being the father that maybe, and again, and this will lead to my next question, that maybe you did or did not have, what has this done for your own confidence and your own sense of worth in that level of manhood?
Well, I think for me, I have been gifted with a high personal velocity, as I call it. I am in a ball of energy that's just waiting to happen. I mean, that's one of the gifts that I have. I can come into a situation, a room, an interaction. I can inject energy into that environment. That can be a positive. It can also be a negative. And for me, sometimes I would bring that energy into a situation, and it would be very disruptive, right? And I would break things, like not physically, but like break the dynamic, break the rhythm. And a lot of that was because of my pace. And so for me as a man, I recognize that oftentimes I had a pace that was very different than my family. And I had this word called patience that I would try and focus on. And I just like failed all the time at having patience. And I realized it wasn't about patience, it was about pace. And by having a pace where I looked at my wife's pace and my kids' pace, and I met them where they are, and then we worked together to move forward as a unit instead of me being light years ahead of them and trying to pull them along. And I think as a man, that was one of the important things that I came to in my realization, that I've got the ability as the spiritual leader, the physical leader of the family, the one who sets the tone and the pace to be productive and bring positive energy into the situation and the environment, or I can be very negative and destructive and I can tear down the environment. That's through my words, my attitudes, my actions, and the way that I bring myself into that environment. So for me, a lot of times that was when I would travel for work, or when I would be away from the home in an office coming home. It's just taking a minute to meditate and to pause and to do some breathing exercises in the car. If someone probably looked at me, they think I was weird, or I don't know what they would think as I'm sitting there in the car before I walked in the house. But it was immensely helpful, because what it did was it recentered me, and it allowed me to bring positive energy into the home instead of bringing anything with me from my day that maybe was negative, environment, circumstances, things of that nature that were maybe out of my control, that I would then bring into my family. Because that's what I found was oftentimes my biggest mistakes as a father and as a husband were when I would bring with me context from an environment or a circumstance that maybe I couldn't control, maybe I could have controlled, but I would take it out on those that I loved the most, because I knew that they would forgive me. And that was a subconscious thing that I went through. So as a man, I think all of us have that challenge where it's our pride, it's our ego. I put those things in check. And that was a big part of that process. The last thing I would say is, as a part of that ego and pride syndrome, I recognized that it wasn't about me being the hero to my family. And that's going to be counterintuitive to what most of the world says about dad, right? It's dad's the hero. Dad wears the cape. Dad's Superman. I actually think it's the opposite. I think that if you make your kids the hero of their own story by allowing them to succeed or fail on their own in their youth, with you being there as their guide, that leads to a productive young adult and eventually an adult, because they've experienced failure in their youth and they can handle that in adulthood. And you've been there to guide them through that process. It ideally ends up turning around and makes you the hero of the story, if you think about it, because you are their dad. You always be their hero. But if you make them the hero of their own story, they get that experience on their own. It also allows other guides to come into their story. Justin, you are way more knowledgeable about exercise and sleep and diet than I ever will be. You've got more in your one finger than I do in two hands. But if I were to try to play that role in my kid's life and not bring someone like you into their life, then I'd be harming my children, because I wouldn't be giving that experience. I don't know a lot about hunting and fishing. I brought hunting experts and fishermen into my kids' lives and given them experiences that they loved that I would never be able to give them on their own. But it took me putting my pride and my ego in check and recognizing that I don't have to be the hero. I just need to be the guide. And you bring other guides into their life as well.
It's so unique what you're describing here, and it gave me goosebumps, actually, making the kids the hero of their own story. But you're literally running your family, running your fatherhood like a business. Yeah. You're bringing it. We, as CEOs or executives, there's no way that you're going to try and be your CMO, your CTO, your COO, your whatever other C-suite you want to put in there, your director, your manager. You're not going to be that role. You're not going to try and play that role.
That's right.
But so often we try to do and be everything for our kids, and then, like you said, the ego gets in the way. We get upset that we can't do it. We get upset that we can't provide it the way in which it should. But rather bringing the people in together, empowering them, being the connector of greatness, and giving them those experiences. It's just a powerful visual that that I think it really brings together. Who, when you're working with people and you have people come into your network, what do you find most often they're suffering from when it comes to fatherhood and being able to be the leader, be the man, be the person that they want to be?
Well, a couple of things. One is, I think that the role of the man and the father today has been the role of the man. We've been demasculated, right? And we've been feminized to a large extent. And I think that the role of the male has been downplayed and downgraded in society a lot and in the media. I think the role of the father has also been shamed to a large extent. And it's kind of like the dad who's on the couch drinking the beer, not doing anything with his family is how it's portrayed if you look at a lot of media today.
The Homer Simpson of the world.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly right. And so what I see there is a lot of that's portrayed when the man comes in because he starts to identify with what he sees. And so I see a lot of men who are just broken and who have deep father wounds from their father or lack of a father, and they feel like they're in prison because all they have is that experience that they had or didn't have from their own father. That's what they're basing their own fatherhood off of. So a big part of that is restructuring that concept and saying, look, in my case, I'm a Christian, so they have a heavenly father that they can identify with. And once they understand that they can receive from him, then they can go out and be the father they need to be. I think they also need to forgive their father and heal those father wounds. So that's a big part of it. I think the second piece is that there's oftentimes, so that's identity. The second piece is often around the fact that they are focused on being provider, and because that's all they've known. And so they focus so much on being provider, it creates this dissonance, this tension between work and home. And they feel like they want to go win and have results at work and be successful and have all those achievements because that's, again, what they've seen, been modeled after, been taught. And oftentimes it's part of that father wound that I just spoke of. And they don't recognize that they can be successful at work and at home. And when you do both, that's when you're truly successful. So it's helping them understand that the tension's always going to be there. It's managing that tension. Another big thing is that many fathers try to do fatherhood in isolation. It goes back to pride and ego and arrogance. And once they break down that wall and recognize that in community, that we as fathers can come together and do far more, where 1 + 1 can equal 3 in most circumstances, when it relates to fathers coming together, that they break down those barriers, they join community, and they see that that can accelerate their fatherhood even more. Those are a couple of things that I see very often and some of the bigger challenges that we as fathers are facing today.
I think that's super important what you talked about in terms of the community aspect, because it's just all it takes is one simple tip or trick or strategy to share with another guy for him to implement it to change his entire family. Like that is so powerful, and people don't see it. Guys won't experience that unless they actually get into a group of men that are having these conversations, which I think I'm encouraged to see. It's happening more and more now. I think that's the positive thing. It's okay to be part of a guy's group talking about some of the challenges that we have. I think it's important for guys to face that. It just kind of reminds me of the workshops that we haven't done in a long time because of this COVID situation. But when you ask a group of guys, 20 guys, how many of them feel like they are not, you can say, effective as fathers, as husbands? They don't feel like they're enough. They're not making enough money. All it takes is that first guy to raise his hand, and then the other guys to see that and say, okay, I'm not the only guy here. That is powerful to see when guys can actually open up to that. So I think the work that you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. Community is important. And just from my perspective, that doesn't make you any less masculine to be part of a group. It's like a bunch of guys sitting there talking about sports, that's masculine, but a bunch of guys talking about, how to be a better dad, that can be perceived differently, but it's just as masculine, if not more. One of the things I think this is just, I can see you have very strong values and views about this, but I'm a firm believer. I'm very much on your side when you talk about masculinity, because that is a big aspect that we've seen change with the feminist movement, with toxic masculinity, with this Me Too movement. It really has hurt how men are portrayed in society. And we need to gain that back, but gain that back in a mindful way, because men have built into us inherently. If we take a look at the genetic aspect, the neurobiological aspect, we are built to be leaders. We are built to be driven. And if we take that away, then we essentially are not being ourselves in terms of the way we are built to be. So I'm very much on your side there. I think what the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you. And, you make a really important point that all it takes is one idea, right? So, it's just like in business. That's why you network. That's why you connect. That's why you read business books. That's why you do all those things that we do in business. And Justin's hit on this many times. I believe that what we do in business should be brought into the home. And we don't do it far often enough, right? And we set mission, vision, value statements. We've set a painted picture for our family. We have goal setting. We just did our goal setting and our dream boards right here at the beginning of the year as a family. Like, we bring all those business principles into our family, and we do it for the same reasons we do it in business, because otherwise you're just wandering aimlessly. As a father, you've got no compass. You have no true north. How are you going to lead your family if you're not positioning yourself in the right direction? Andy Stanley has this awesome quote that I use all the time. He says, direction, not intention, determines destination. And so if you have this destination you want to get your family to, and you have this picture of what you want them to be when they become adults, then it's the direction you point yourself in, not your intention, right? Intentionality is important. Being intentional is important, but ultimately it's the direction you point yourself in that's going to get you there. And then it's being intentional along the way and engaged. And, you know, those little moments are so powerful. I had a dad the other day I was on a call with, and he has a 13-year-old daughter. I've got a 13-year-old daughter. And I said, have you ever done a daddy-daughter date night? And he said, I just did one because somebody I talked to told me that I should do one. The guy who told him that's on this podcast, by the way. And he said, I just did one. It was really powerful. And I said, well, you're going to keep doing them and start doing it monthly, right? And once a month, take your daughter out. And I said, is she into makeup? Like, does she do her makeup? Yeah, she does. And I said, well, think if your daughter was walking into her room and she's got her vanity mirror in her room. And imagine if you went in there with a dry erase marker and you wrote a little love note to your daughter on you're beautiful. I see you, you matter. Like, that's what every daughter wants to know, those three things. And imagine if you started writing notes to her on her board once a week or whenever, you know, sporadically you did that. Something so simple, takes no effort literally, and will change your relationship with your young daughter. And just that one thing, it's so powerful, right? I got that from somebody else. I did it with my daughter. It worked tremendously. I've shared it and passed it on. There's things like that you only get in community. If you're trying to do this all alone, it's not going to happen. The other thing I would say is that I find it interesting. I talk to a lot of CEOs, and many of these CEOs have read every business book. They focus so much of their career, their life, their time on building a business. And one of the CEOs looked at me and he said, Justin, I've never read a single book on parenting. And he goes, I'm like ashamed that I'm even saying that right now. So we sent him a copy of Daddy Saturday. So that'll be your first book. But then, let's stack you up with a couple others I'd also recommend. And he's reading through those books. And he's like, I've focused my whole career on being an amazing CEO. I've got 4 kids. I'm ashamed that I haven't focused on that as well. And so I think it's, as men, we need to step up and also take on our role as men, take on our role as fathers, own that role, and really focus on our faith, our family, our fitness, and our finances. And those 4 pillars, make sure we've got those things locked down.
It's so impactful, Justin. And I teared up as you were telling the story, because it truly embodies what us as humans and what us as males want to portray as leaders. As Pradeep said, we are intrinsically motivated to be leaders and show up in that way, but yet sometimes we don't know how to do it. We just don't know what to do. And just the story that you mentioned, imagine that you don't just do that to your son, to your daughter, but you do that to your significant other, to your spouse, to yourself. Think about the way in which it changes your psyche, your neurological makeup, the way in which you show up on a day-to-day basis. And now compound that. You don't think that's going to change the way in which you show up to your business, the way you show up to your job, the way you treat your employees, the way you treat your executive team, the way you treat everybody that you're around. And then guess what happens to your results? And so it's so awesome to hear these types of stories, and so exciting to hear the work that you're doing, because it is so needed, so empowering, and so impactful. So where can people get to know more about Daddy Saturday, Dad Boss, Kid Boss, and the process in which you're going through, other than if you're on Clubhouse every Wednesday, this trio is going to be meeting on Clubhouse at 5:30 p.m. Eastern to have more discussion like this, where we can really interact with you guys as listeners and audience members to really come in and get some more information from the three of us and throw some things around, meet as like-minded men to really empower one another to have impactful takeaways.
Well, let me be clear first, and I do write those notes to my wife. I just can't tell you what those notes are in public. And she erases them as fast as she can, because sometimes the kids, or one time her mom actually walked in our bedroom and they were all over the mirror and she was mortified, but it was awesome. So yes, do that for your wife as well. They can find me, Justin Bat, on LinkedIn at Justin Bats. It's a great place to connect with me personally. I'd also recommend you go to daddysaturday.com. That's our hub for all things Daddy Saturday. Dadboss.com is where you get more information on our community of dads. Sign up for our curriculum and our amazing platform that is just launching. It's going to include Own It by the other Justin. So we're excited to help you progress in your faith, your family, your fitness, and your finances. And then kidboss.com is launching here in the near future, and we will have that fully kicked off by April and have a whole bunch of kids. We're counting on 1,000 kids this year being enrolled in our virtual coaching that have absentee fathers. So we're super pumped. 2021 is going to be a great year, and we look forward to helping serve all of your listeners, to help them be better dads, more intentional, more engaged, and as I always say, make it a great Daddy Saturday.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So guys, as you're out there listening, it comes back to business. It comes back to structure. It comes back to intentionality, but it comes back to direction. So what can you do today to empower the next generation, those that you're raising, those that you're sitting with, those that you love the most, to allow your kids to be the hero of their own story and for you to be their guide? Stay humble, stay hungry. We'll see you next week.